Will work for food. Old King Cruel was a nasty old fool, and a nasty old fool was he. He called for his pipe, and he called for his bowl, and he called for the cancellation of all federal holidays, including Christmas, Easter, and St. Crispin's Day, and the execution of all enemies of the crown, both foreign and domestic, including but not limited to his fiddlers 3. Chapter 13. While stone is an excellent building material, it's downright lousy for acoustics. Elsbeth's high-pitched screams ricocheted off the walls of the dark and narrow stairway to the dungeon, causing the guards much discomfort. "You'll pay for this, all of you," she wailed. "My father has sold hearing aids to some very important people." The guards had no idea what a hearing aid was, but by the time they'd wrestled Elsbeth into the tiny cell, slammed the iron door, and bolted the lock, they might have needed one. "Get back here," she hollered through the doors, rough and rusted. But the guards hurried down the hall just as fast as their pudgy legs could take them. It was only when the 4 men had turned the corner and taken their shadows with them that Elsbeth finally realized all the yelling was in vain. She took a deep breath and had a quick look around at her new environment. She quickly noted, though, that there may have been 2 kinds of castles, the fortress type and the fairy princess type. A dungeon was a dungeon, dark and cold, the air filled with moisture and hopelessness. Just then she heard a soft whimpering to her left. She turned and peered into the adjoining cell, the single torch on the dungeon wall lighting it just to the point that she could make out the silhouette of a hulking 2-headed creature. "Stay away from me," she ordered, backing away as far as the iron bars at the other end of her cell would allow. "I'm not afraid of you." The beast did not respond, and as her eyes slowly adjusted to the poor lighting, Elsbeth soon realized it was not some double-headed monster at all, but rather 2 people huddled closely together. The woman was sobbing lightly, while the man wrapped his arms around her shoulders. "Look at her," the woman said with a whispery sniff. "She's beautiful, so strong and beautiful." The smile on the woman's lips suggested that the salty drops running down her cheeks were in fact tears of joy, though what one could possibly have to be joyous about in a place like this, Elsbeth could not fathom. "Yes, she is," agreed the man. "She is indeed." Elsbeth just stared at the 2. The woman was small but sturdy, with a Prince Valiant haircut that framed her gaunt face and sharp right angles. The man was mostly unremarkable, with the traditional trappings of middle age, an expanding midsection and a hairline in retreat. "Let me guess," said Elsbeth. "Jack and Jill." "Yes," said the man, with a smile that revealed a small gap between his 2 front teeth. The woman left her husband's comforting embrace and moved toward Elsbeth until the bars stopped her progress. She pushed her face through the space between as far as it would go. "I can't believe it," she said, sniffling. "I can't believe you're here." "Yeah, I'm not sure what to believe myself anymore," said Elsbeth, studying the floors, the walls, and the ceiling for any quick and easy way out that she might have missed at first glance. "All I wanted to do is find that stupid well and go home, and instead I'm stuck in this terrible dungeon. This has been the worst day of my entire life." "Don't worry," said Jill. "Everything will be all right." The woman's very demeanor was soft and soothing, but Elsbeth had been fooled by such things before. "It'll be all right?" Elsbeth replied. "I'm sorry, lady, but you don't know what you're talking about. Cruel's putting me on trial for treason. Maybe you aren't up to date on Crime and Punishment, but most people convicted of treason don't end up with community service, raking leaves or painting over graffiti. They end up in front of a firing squad, or whatever they do around here to execute people. By the way, how do they execute people around here?" "Beheading," said the man. Jill spun around and shot him a very stern look. "Jack," she scolded, "there's no need to tell her that. What's wrong with you anyway?" "Just being honest," replied Jack. "She did ask." "Seriously," said Jill, "when are you going to learn to keep your mouth shut?" "There must be a way out of here," said Elsbeth, doing her best to ignore the bickering couple. She gave the door a good shake, but it moved only enough to make a small rattling. "Somehow we've got to escape from here, so you can show me the way to the well before Cruel decides to chop off my head." "He won't kill you," said Jack. He joined his wife at the bars, and Elsbeth noticed that he walked with a very pronounced limp, greatly favoring his left leg. "Really? What makes you so sure?" she answered. "Because he failed once before." "Jack, no," Jill snapped. "We shouldn't. Not yet." "Shouldn't what?" said Elsbeth. "What do you mean he failed once before?" Jack spoke to Elsbeth, but his eyes were locked on Jill's searing glare. "Nothing," he said. "I just meant that... nothing." "No," said Elsbeth. "It wasn't nothing. What do you mean?" Jack looked at Elsbeth, then back to his wife's rigid face. He opened his mouth to speak, but before words could find their way out, the door to the dungeon squeaked open once more, and the 4 guards marched in with Georgie firmly in their grasp. "This is absurd," pleaded the king's former personal valet. "Everyone knows that loganberries are very hard to find this time of year. It was an oversight, a mistake anyone could have made." Without a word, the man with the Van Dyke unlocked the empty cell next to Elsbeth's and shoved Georgie in hard enough that he didn't stop until he hit the back wall and tumbled to the ground in a heap. "Please," he begged, crawling on his hands and knees to the front of the cell as the guards turned and made for the exit. "If I could just have a word with His Highness, I'm sure I could convince him that this is all just a terrible mistake." The door to the dungeon slammed shut, and once the echo had faded, the room was silent for a brief moment before Georgie began sobbing. "No," he wailed, "I'm too young to die." He stopped blubbering when he heard the clearing of a throat and looked over to see Elsbeth staring down at him. "You're too young to die," she said. "I'm 11. If you're too young to die, then when am I?" With the help of the bars, Georgie pulled himself to his feet and moved toward Elsbeth's cell. "You are an awful person is what you are," he said. "Why did you have to tell him about the loganberries? Because of you, I've lost my job." "Yeah," said Elsbeth. "Cruel's going to chop my head off for treason, and whatever the penalty is for stealing a tart." "It generally results in having one's hand chopped off," said Jack. "Jack, for crying out loud," said Jill. "What?" she wanted to know. "If he's in a especially good mood," offered Georgie, "perhaps he'll chop off your head first." "Oh, yay, goody for me," said Elsbeth. "I'm just saying it would certainly save you some discomfort." Elsbeth growled and grabbed 2 handfuls of her curled hair and fought the urge to tear it out by the roots. "I'll put in a good word for you," Georgie added. "Quiet," shouted Elsbeth. "Enough. I can't take this anymore. Everyone just stop talking to me for a minute. I need to think." She shuffled to the darkened back of her cell, leaned against the rock wall, and with a sigh slid to the ground. She drew her knees up and rested her muddled head upon them, the silky gown smooth against her cheek. Her prison mates honored her request for silence, and Georgie sat down himself, while Jack and Jill just stood and looked upon Elsbeth for a good 10 minutes before Jill said, "Elsbeth, dear?" Elsbeth did not answer, and when she failed to respond a second time, it was quite apparent that the girl had fallen fast asleep. And when Jill was absolutely certain of this, she whispered, "Sleep, sweet Jacqueline, sleep." Georgie Porgy, puddin' and pie, found loganberries in short supply. When Cruel ate the pie, he said, off with Georgie's puddin' head."